title of this talk is My Journey to the Qur'an, a Complete Revelation. I don't want to say by Sam Gerrans because the Qur'an obviously is not by Sam Gerrans, but this is the version that he has brought into the world, and his translation, his struggle, and his work. And this is the book that brought me to this moment, and I am going to tell you about that story. I'm not going to explain to you my whole life story, but let's just go back where it all started. I was born in the belly of the beast, Manhattan, New York City, Mount Sinai Hospital, on a cold winter day. In the Empire State, New York City is in the Empire State. It's not a stretch of the imagination to see New York City as the official capital of the world. I mean, after all, the United Nations is there. Wall Street is there. It is. It's metropolis. It's man's great accomplishment. And if you ever fly over New York City, especially landing, I find to be really fascinating. If you come in at a certain time of day, and you literally just can fly right up the East River, and it's miraculous and also terrifying. In the metro area of New York, there must be 25 million people stacked around there, and I was one of them growing up. I didn't live in New York City, but I grew up in orbit around it. My parents got divorced when I was very young, probably 2. I barely remember my father ever living with us, but he stayed in my life, and he did provide financial support. And he moved us to just north of New York City, which we just called the city. We never called it New York City. It was just the city. And when we talked about the city, we meant Manhattan. If we were going to the Bronx, we said we're going to the Bronx. We're going to Brooklyn. We're going to Brooklyn. We're going to Queens. We're going to Queens. Never went to Staten Island. I had no purpose to go down there. I could get into the city in 35 minutes on an express train, which I often did because my father lived in Midtown Manhattan. And I would often go and visit him, take the train in. It was common to just get on a train. Myself, my sister. And driving later on, it would be, you could get in the city in 40 minutes, depending on traffic. Again, I'm talking about Midtown Manhattan. So this is where I grew up. I grew up in orbit around the capital of the world. And it was... I'm glad I grew up where I grew up because it really exposed me to the empire from the get-go. There was no illusion to what the situation was. Money, power, and that's how it worked. Money and power. The town I grew up in was radically secular. Nobody talked about God. Certainly nobody talked about Jesus. We kids, religion, God, none of it ever came up. We sang Christmas carols in school along with Hanukkah songs. I mean, most of my friends growing up were Jewish. By the time I made it to middle school, I mean, every weekend pretty much there was a bat mitzvah, a bar mitzvah. My best friend growing up from when I was in kindergarten, from a very prominent, powerful Jewish family. And this is what we did. But we didn't talk about God. We didn't talk about religion. I did go to church, and it was a Greek Orthodox church, and the priest only spoke in Greek, so I didn't understand a word he said. But I did enjoy the bread and the wine. And when I went to Sunday school, I actually, after a couple times, asked my mother to stop bringing me there, or to just pick me up right after the service, because I was a distraction, because I wanted to talk about dinosaurs and how they fit into the whole scheme of things. And obviously that was not part of the program. I also had other questions about God and so forth, but nobody wanted to answer those. And I just let it go. I didn't think about it. And I stopped going. And my mother actually gave us the option to go to Broadway plays instead of church, which was fun. But church was not really a part of my life either. So I grew up incredibly secular. Celebrated Christmas, obviously, celebrated Easter. Supposedly I was Christian. I mean, again, it was never a point, even in high school. I did have some Catholic friends, and they started talking about like your confirmations and so forth. And I was like, I don't understand any of that. I don't want any part of it. If I may digress, when I did go to a boarding school when I was in 6th grade, up in New England, and I actually had to go to church every Sunday. And it was a beautiful old wood and stained glass windows and beautiful old architecture, Victorian architecture, Episcopalian church with a really nice, I don't know what they call it, pasture. And I would just sit there and, but it's painful. All I wanted to do was just go outside in a field, and the services lasted they were an hour and a half too long. But I would sit there and contemplate life. But again, I can't remember a word that the pastor said. If you asked me about it, I couldn't remember anything. I don't remember looking in the book, nothing. So that was really, and often I skipped it, even though they took attendance. I would, somehow skip out and go hang out in the fields, run around, do whatever, anything other than that. And religion and God were always in my mind connected. That you couldn't have one without the other. And that is a very curious situation, and I think most people have that opinion, that God and religion are connected and they cannot be separated. Because how could you have religion without God? Well, as we'll learn eventually, I think that is very possible, because that is the case if you really study any of this or are exposed to it. You can most certainly have God without religion. But religion is pretty much what has made us who we are to this day, if you really think about it. It has been the overriding factor and reality of the human experience for over 2,000 years. It's undeniable. So I'm not denying religion's impact on humanity. What I'm saying is I've always just had a problem with the idea that God, when you're young, you're told God and religion are together, and that's it. You can't have God without religion, okay? But these religions, you find out when you start, going around to a church, and even my friends who, they're synagogue stuff, it's not really God. The bar mitzvah, it's about how much stuff you can get, you know? What's Christmas? I mean, is it about Jesus, God, who's supposedly the Son of God or God incarnate? It's about as many presents I can get. I couldn't care less about anything like Easter. How did that get? A bunny and eggs and pastel colors? What does that have to do with anything? Oh, it's rebirth. It's Easter. It's pagan. But we accept that because we were born into, and when you're a kid, you get lots of presents, you get candy. It's beautiful. I mean, Christmas is still one of my fondest memories growing up. I mean, what's more exciting than Christmas? Getting presents and excitement, you know. And winter and Christmas trees and fireplace and snow, and it's beautiful. It's a natural thing, but it has nothing to do with religion or God. Let's just say, you know, I mean, with that being said, I did have a significant God realization event when I was in 7th grade, the summer between 7th and 8th grade. I had a ferret, and little guy's name was Apache, and that ferret could get out of anything, his cage, whatever, and you know, he could really escape whenever he wanted to. He happened to escape out of the house somehow, and my mother printed up flyers and she had a picture of a ferret, because a lot of people didn't even know what a ferret looked like. They didn't even know what a ferret was. Remember, there was no internet back then, so she had a really nice flyer with her home phone number on it, and we put them up all over, and I would go out at night with a flashlight on my bike, and really, I'd canvass the neighborhood. And really, I also like just being out alone on my bike, and I'd search for this little ferret. And I would say about a week later, I still hadn't given up, but it wasn't looking good. And before I went to bed, it's probably around midnight. She went to bed pretty late, 12:30. I got on my knees and just, you know, put my hands on the bed in like a prayer position, what I had seen on TV somewhere, somebody doing it. Not that I was ever taught that or had ever done it before. And I prayed to God for the first time in my life. And I remember it so vividly. I remember saying, God, please bring Apache back to me. Please. Please. And I got in bed, laid down, and not 10 minutes later, because I was not one of those kids who could fall asleep. It took me a good half an hour, 45 minutes to actually fall asleep. I heard the phone ring. That's weird. So late. But I knew instantly. I knew what the phone call was about. And then my mother bangs on the door. They found Apache. They found Apache. They found Apache. I knew it. What happened was that the little ferret ended up scratching at their screen door at 12, 15 at night. And they didn't know what the heck this thing was. And one of the, I think the grandmother lived with them or something, if I can remember correctly. And she says, oh, I remember seeing a flyer at the grocery store down by over there that someone was missing this little animal. And they drove down there and they got our number, and then they drove back, and then they called us right then and there. And we went and we picked him up that night. And he had a big bite on his side. I remember the vet thought it was a rat or something, but he was alive. And I mean, that just really was a big proof. In the Qur'an, you read about the proofs of God. Now, literally, the back of your hand is a proof. The front of my hand, the fact that I'm speaking this right now, the fact that any of this is happening, there's an internet, that we have a language, that we have air in our lungs, is proof of God. But we have just been conditioned that is just, it's so obvious that it's not a proof anymore. It's just how it is. And we call it nature and life, and it's just how it is. But this was a big proof. For that age, it was big, and it really stuck with me, as obviously, because I'm speaking of it. That was my first experience with the subtle awareness of God in my life. And that there's something going on. That's all I knew. There's something going on, and this is not a coincidence, and it's more than just synchronicity, which I didn't know that word. But it's not true, actually, because there was that Police album. There was a Police album called Synchronicity. And I remember, no one knew what that word meant, but I liked the name of the album, and I liked the album, of course. But I didn't, connect the two. I didn't know. So life goes on. No other experiences like that, because I completely did not turn any attention whatsoever towards God. For years, I have no recollection of anything that could remotely be a subtle aware connection, proof moment. Because I didn't have any feeling for God, even though I always had that experience with praying, and then for the ferret to be found, and the ferret's found. We get the phone call 15 minutes later. But it always stuck in my mind. There's something there. There's something going on. There's something to it. I don't necessarily want to call it God. Nobody wants to hear God. Nobody wants to talk about God. That was my experience. And religion, certainly. I mean, religion gave me this ill feeling when I just thought about going to church and religion and reading the Bible. Oh, I couldn't think of anything more fucking boring than religion. So it wasn't a part of my life. And again, I thought religion and God, you couldn't separate the two. So fast forward to winter 2000, right after the millennium. It was a dark winter. I was living in New York City, the city, Manhattan. And I had a pretty significant experience at the actual New Year's Eve Y2K. I was down in Florida in the middle of the Everglades at a big festival, music festival, my first music festival. And it was actually very transformative. It was great. It was happy. It was beautiful. I get back to the city, and I'm just miserable. And New York City in the winter is a very gray, rough place. You're drinking 3 nights a week at least. And, it's just a cold, gray, miserable place. But that's what I grew up knowing. So the winter just dragged on, and it got worse and worse and worse. And about sometime in early March, can see the spring is arriving, but spring in New York City is it doesn't really start getting nice until probably in April, but then it can just be hot and there's no leaves on the tree. It's just a very weird. New York City is, in my opinion, is an awful place. It's just a disgusting, awful, hot, messy, nasty place. But it's what I knew. It's where I was born. And I know obviously people love it and they say, oh, the culture and the hustle and the bustle. I mean, whatever. It's a miserable place. And I was more miserable than I'd ever been there. I'd been living there for 5 years after college. Incidentally, I went to college in Miami. So, it's a big difference. And all I could think about was getting back to Florida. But I couldn't really see how I could untangle myself. I was no longer working on Wall Street, which I had been working on for several years. And I was kind of just in between jobs or whatever. And I just liked the idea of not working and just figuring out, And but I was in a rough place. And around late March, I said, I was so miserable. I mean, I don't know if I could call myself suicidal, because I don't really know what that means. I guess it could mean something different for everybody, but I was in a very bad place, spiritually, emotionally, physically, everything. Drinking, I wasn't really doing drugs, but just drinking. And life, I just expected, the year 2000 would come and life would just automatically be so much more amazing. And it wasn't. So around in March, I did something I hadn't done since I was that summer between 7th and 8th grade. As I got on my hands and knees. And like I saw Muslims doing it. And I prayed to God, and I said, God, please deliver me. Those were my exact words. And that was something I had never done before. And again, I hadn't prayed to God or mentioned God in any kind of isolation since that event when my ferret was found. So it wasn't something I had been doing. And it was like the last resort. It was a Hail Mary. Because I knew whatever it is, I knew that I could not. I needed help. I needed serious help. Like, not the kind of help you're getting, from a therapist or something like that, or friends or anything. I needed deliverance. And within a week, the weather changed. Sun came out. And a couple of amazing things started happening. I got offered to work as a waiter out in East Hampton at a very cool happening restaurant club. I got offered a place to stay, and my father had actually rented a really awesome townhouse right in the middle of Southampton Village. And I owned my apartment, and I was able to sublease it out to somebody who gave me a lot of money a month. And next thing I know, I'm living in the Hamptons, And I met a really great girl who introduced me to yoga and meditation and Eastern sciences and metaphysics, crystals, all that kind of stuff. And I had a really amazing summer. I ended up not even having to work because I got bit by a dog and my hand got infected. I ended up spending a couple days in the hospital, and I got in an accident in my car and I couldn't drive. And I didn't need to because I was getting all this income from renting my apartment that I didn't, and I was staying for free in a place. I was like, I don't need to work. So I spent the summer riding my bike to the beach and just looking at all the people who were leaving on Sunday evening, just how miserable they were to start their pilgrimage back to the city. And here I was, the best part of the week was when nobody was out there. I loved it. I really loved it. And this is when I began writing a lot, short stories, ideas, thoughts. And one day in July, I'm riding my bike to the beach. It's a gorgeous middle of the week, no one around. And I saw this hawk flying, and this sun and the clouds and the breeze and the ocean smell. And I was overwhelmed with gratitude and love and gratitude to God. And right then and there, I stopped my bike and I found a patch of grass, and I got down on my knees. I bowed my head to the ground and I said, God, I surrender to you. I said, God, I surrender to you. And that is certainly nothing I had done before. I don't even know if I had even heard anybody say it. I don't know where it came from. I certainly didn't know anybody who spoke like that. My friends, the people I hung out with, we were all in the same extremely secular boat. But I did it. And it's the only thing that I could think of doing for the immense magnitude of gratitude that I felt, that I truly felt that God had delivered me to that moment where if it wasn't for God, if I hadn't in late March gone on my hands and knees, bowed my head to the floor and said, God, deliver me, please deliver me. I need help. I would not have been in that moment of revelation and riding my bike to the beach. And the beauty of the world, the proofs of the world, it overwhelmed me. And that was the only thing it was like a natural thing to do, though. To me, it's just a natural thing to do, to get on one's knees and bow our head literally touch our head our forehead to the ground and give thanks. I mean, what the hell? What else is there? Creation. We're created. This thing is created. It's not an accident. You're not an accident. I'm certainly not an accident. Summer went on, and I ended up going back to the city. And I had a decision to make. I said, am I going to get back into Wall Street? Am I going to get back into the race? Or am I going to move to Florida and just, start a life down there? And mid-September, I got the opportunity for an interview at a brokerage firm in the South Tower of the World Trade Center, building number 1. Don't quote me on that. It could be 1. It could be 2. It was like the 82nd floor, 85th floor. The office had just been renovated. I was being offered a small office, but an office with a view out over the harbor of Statue of Liberty and Ellis Isle. And I was going to be a part of an investment group, and it was a great opportunity. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, today, those days, I mean, I mean, you look in the paper and you find an ad for a job like that, and they take you. But nowadays, obviously, you need like a master's degree to even get in the door. It wasn't like it that back then. It wasn't like that. So I remember having an interview. They offered me the job, and I went to have lunch with the guy who interviewed me, and I actually had worked in the World Financial Center, which is right next door to the World Trade Center, for a couple of years at a different firm. And so I knew the World Trade Center very well. I mean, I would have lunch in a deli in the basement all the time. They had always had a farmer's market on the Tuesdays, in the fall and the spring. And it was just, I would get off if I took the subway down instead of, a friend driving me down there, Liberty Street, walk right by the World Trade Center. I mean, it was just part of my life. And we're up there, and we don't go down to the ground floor and leave. We go to around the 40th floor where they had a mall there, and we had lunch. And I thought it was really weird. I said, "You don't leave the building?" He says, "No, it's too much of a hassle to leave." They had a smoking room or something, a little hut in there so you could go smoke. It was too much of a hassle to actually get outside into the air if you were all the way up top there just for lunch. The journey down could take you 20 minutes alone. So and I thought that was really strange, and I was like, oh, I don't like that, Yeah, that was September 2000. Well, I didn't take the job. I decided that I'm going to sell my apartment and move to Florida. Before then, or I should say, right around in October, I had an experience where I found a book in a bookstore, and it led me to the occult realm. Now I'm still with God, but I'm now traveling the occult realms. And I think it was an important thing to happen, but it's not about God. It's about ourselves. It's about our deciding what we're going to do with our own will, and we will what we want, do it that will. Not about God's will. But I would often say, when I started getting into prayer, and God, let me do your will, but may your will be what my will is, kind of stuff, mitigation, bargaining, all that kind of stuff. So I live in New York, moved to Florida. And that began many years of traveling the occult realms, between actual practicing of magic, actual tarot cards, of course, investigating into things like sex magic, and wanting to know all the deepest, darkest secrets, the occult secrets possible. And of course, the Egyptian gods are very Horus. Oh, I would pray to Horus. Horus. Oh, trying to figure everything. Well, was Osiris God? And then you start, getting into the Sumerian situation. God is Anu. Oh. Sons, daughters, the whole thing. I mean, reading Zechariah Stitchin, I'm sure there's some of you out there who've traveled a similar path, because I think that the deeper of a thinker you are, the more critical of a thinker, the freer you are from the system, the the higher your capacity for understanding and your curiosity is going to lead you down paths like that, because you want to know, you want to find out the truth of what this world is. You want to know what the truth of this world is. And that is why I was doing that. Not because I was trying to gain occult power, and I thought that stuff was like secondary. But I wanted to know the truth of the world, what our creation is, what the universe is, if there is a universe, what the world is, what our soul is, what happens to us when we die. I know it's before we were born. That was my focus and my reasoning. And I toiled in that realm for a long time. And for years, long time. And my surrender to God kept getting deeper, though, but always on my terms, always mitigated, bargained, that sort of stuff. I did not consider the possibility that, look, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to kill anybody. I'm not going to do other bad things. But anything I do to myself, that's, a crime against oneself. That's all right. Oh, it's all about, God. And maybe I am God experiencing myself, and I better experience everything because God wants to experience everything in this world, right? All that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about. You've been there. You know it. You know what I'm talking about. The you are God idea. You are God experiencing life on earth. We've all been through it. And I'm sorry I have this mocking tone, but it's like, what else, what other way is there to talk about it once you really get to a certain point, with it. And then, eventually we started hearing the secret was big, started getting big. Oh, you control your own reality, the secret. Oh, the universe. That was it. That was the one that really got. I'm not going to say God. I'm going to say the universe. The universe wants me to do this. Praise the universe. A lot of the girls that I was hanging out, the white girls with crystals, that's the yoga girls. It was all about the universe. Never say God. And anyway, if someone did say God, it was never in a sense of like, it was never in a fearing God kind of way. It was a, God is love. God wants you to be happy. God wants you to love. There was never any fear of it. There's never any fear of God. But over the years, I had been in some situations where I actually believed that I felt true fear of God. And it's like this upwelling of numb radiation, like a bomb goes off or something. It's a thunderous inner experience that I cannot repeat. I cannot even really give words to, and I cannot even explain it anymore. Oh, what's that all about? So on life goes. Then in 2018, an event happened, and it was a life-changing event. I'm not going to get into it, but there was a death that happened around me that was sudden and tragic and shook me to my core. It was, I can kind of say it was one of the worst things that had happened to me in my life. And it was just a shocking, upsetting situation. And the events leading up to it were, to me, it was a message. But it was so filled with so much grace and so much mercy. Death can't be stopped in this world. Everything that lives dies. I mean, I just can, from bacteria to, mountains. I mean, mountains don't really live, but they definitely are just whittled away and destroyed. I mean, they're created and destroyed, and trees and everything. Every blade of grass is going to die. Every bug's going to die. Every person's going to die. Every animal's going to die. And this world, that's what happens. But what can be different is when there's grace and mercy from God involved in death. And I experienced that firsthand, and it fundamentally changed me. It was early 2018, and it just forced me into like this re-investigation of like what God is, who is God, what is my relationship to God, and I just happened to flee to the, they say flee to God. I fled to God through the Bhagavad Gita. Now you can say that's not the word of God. I mean, look, I don't know. I think there's some perennial truth in that text, but at the same time, it's kind of like this, self-fulfilling system, like plugs back into the system, and then you get like really wrapped up into this whole, the Hindu God thing. Okay, so it's Krishna. Krishna's speaking to Arjuna, and Krishna is the fourth avatar, I think, of Vishnu, who is the sustainer of the universe, but who is Brahma. Well, is Brahma the creator, but is Brahma created Vishnu, and Vishnu sustains the universe, but is Brahma just a force, or is it an entity? Is it God? Again, any of you who've been down that path knows that it's running around the barn. It's a maze without an exit, and it just plugs right back into itself. But it sustained me. It helped me. It helped me greatly. And what it did help me is it helped me start praying every day and reading every morning a holy book. And I created a space on the floor on a nice rug to just bow my head to the ground, give thanks to God every morning, sit back, read a couple pages, take some notes, meditate, and then begin my day. And that had been missing from my life. It really wasn't even part of my life until then. But before then I would do some yoga, and in between, and when I was doing a yoga, I'd be, thank you God for the day. And at nighttime, I would get on my knees, and my hands and knees, and bow my head to the ground. Thank you God for that was always part of my life. But this was a new situation where I was actually studying, and I was praying hard. And I was praying to God, I want to know. I'm done with the occult realities. I've been there. I've done that. There was enough years spent there, and it didn't really get me anywhere. But I'm glad that I experienced it, and I'm glad that I found out that it's not going to get me anywhere. For some people, that reality is definitely enough, and of course, for certain people in this world, that is their religion and their reality, and it really helps them because that's what they're plugged into. But at root of that reality is, it's the satanic system. That's the root of that reality. And the occult is its religion. It's science. So here I am reading the Bhagavad Gita nonstop, reading it over, notes, meditating, prayer, changing my life, realizing that I need to do things differently. I need to hang out with different people. And I really went into myself for 8 months probably. I was very inner in, and what I also started doing was playing a lot of music. I just kind of focused on like learning how to play guitar and singing and playing bass, and things started opening up again for me in the late summer, and went on a couple of nice trips, and started getting things, and some good things were happening, and okay, some good things happened that I don't think I know they would not have happened had that tragedy not occurred. So, 7 months later, these really good things start happening because I believe I had done the work. I suffered the loss. The loss could not be stopped. The loss evidently had to happen because it happened. But the way it happened was full of grace and full of the mercy of God. And in 7 months, 8 months later, a lot of great things started happening. And so then 2019 begins, and if you were anything like me, you were really focused on what was coming was 2020. It's kind of like almost, to me, it felt the same energy and magnitude when we were in 1999 and year 2000 was coming. Like, I just knew something was coming big. So 2019 was kind of a blur, but I was continuing my daily ritual and just doing what I was doing and praying and asking God for more wisdom and guidance and truth. And I just basically just kept reading the Bhagavad Gita back and forth. And eventually I put it down sometime in 2019. And, as 2019 started winding down, some interesting things started happening. And then we hit 2020. I was aware of the COVID very early on in the situation. I first heard about it sometime in late December, and then it kind of got my attention in early January. It just started really blowing up if you were paying attention. And I became very into it. I was obsessed. That's what I spent hours a day obsessing about. And message boards and just learning as much. And then the whole thing has just been all memory hold by now. But there was so much going on then in January and into February. And then, of course, I don't need to tell anybody or explain to anybody what happened then. I really felt that things from personally were something was big was coming personally, and I didn't see it coming in the sense that I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. I could feel that something was going to happen, but I didn't know what it would be. So fast forward to November 2020. I had separated, or split up from this girl I was dating, and it really, I knew I had to do it because I knew, like, subconsciously I knew like this great event was approaching my life, and subconsciously I knew that if I was with this woman, it would be either it wouldn't happen or I would just be distracted, and I couldn't be distracted. And I just knew that I couldn't be with this woman anymore. And then it was mid-November 2020, almost a year ago from the day that I'm recording this. And I was on a message board. If you're listening this far into it, I'll just tell you, it was 4chan in the sub poll politically incorrect. And it was late at night, probably around like 1 a.m, and I was just scrolling through. I saw this thread that said, in a picture of the Quran, and said, "This is the Quran that you must read. This is for you. This is for you, Western man." Pretty much saying, this is for you, white Western man. And a little backstory. I bought a Quran probably late 2000s. And it was one of those, it's a nice hardcover copy, nice green embossed cover. The pages are that, what I think is a miserable stock of paper, which is that Bible paper you used to find like in the drawer of some motel you're staying in the middle of Idaho, and the words are tiny. It's like, just to me, really unusable. I mean, from just a perspective of like a book, if you're supposed to read this thing, it is the most least user-friendly format possible. And but really, what I really wanted to know about was the jinn and what they call the shaitan, al-shaitan, al-jinn. And I wanted to know about that because, that to me was like the most interesting thing about the whole situation. And I really couldn't find anything in there of use. Couldn't really make heads or tails of it. But I did memorize the beginning of it, the first surah. And so I had a Quran. But it was totally useless for me. So I saw this thread, and it was like, you must read this. And I thought I was, over the years, I was wondering if maybe I should just walk into a mosque and say, I want to be a Muslim. What is it? I want to be a Muslim. I want to convert to Islam. I didn't do that. Thankfully. Just more religion, just not what I need. That's for sure. But I did like the idea of a mosque, and how they're not very cluttered with idolatry, of course, and symbolism, and I like the idea of carpet. And not wearing shoes, and no pews. Really never liked that about churches. Pews. Anyway, so I didn't go to a mosque and try to convert or anything like that. But I felt that for years, I felt like this was coming. That I was supposed to read the Quran. And finally, I had found the Quran that I was to read. And I immediately, after reading through the thread, went on Amazon and ordered the Quran, A Complete Revelation, presented by Sam Gerrans. Yes, again, we can't say written. But his edition, his gift to the world. And I got it pretty soon, pretty quickly. And by, the first day I sat down with it, I instantly knew. I knew that this was a life-changing event. This was going to change my life. I didn't know how, and I still can not fully see how, but I knew that it was, and I knew that it will, and I know that it will continue to change the course of my life history and then beyond, which we'll find out is kind of the purpose of the whole thing. When I would read in the morning, just like I had been, kind of like set myself up reading the Bhagavad Gita in the morning, in a rug in a quiet place. And when I started reading, the first surah is long. I think it's about 10 pages. It's just like this flow of information that I could feel like reprogramming my mind. It was like I was coding. It was coding. That's a bit. I was in this flow and this rhythm reading it. But I would only read sometimes I only read one page a day, and sometimes I read 3. I tried not to look ahead, and I actually don't believe that I reread much. So it took me a while, and it was a steady situation. I mean, pretty much every morning I was doing this. If I was home, I was 100% doing it, and I've mostly been home for the past couple of years. So it was pretty much a daily experience. So sometime in July, I finished. Finished in quotation marks, because I think the term finishing the Word of God is kind of silly. There is no, in my opinion, finishing the Qur'an. You start reading it again. That's exactly what I've done. But this time, when I started reading it again, which I pretty much immediately started doing the next day, was I did it with a green pencil, and I started underlining stuff. I mean, the funny thing is I pretty much dog-eared, I would say, at least 2/3 of the pages in the book. So then sometimes I would like triple dog-ear for really important ones. And, so going through it again, which for the record, I'm about halfway through on my second read. And, but in July, I happened to decide that I wanted to learn more about the jinn. And this was a little bit before I finished. It was probably about 2 weeks before I finished officially reading my first read through. And I type in the search engine, obviously not Google, jinn, meaning, Qur'an, and one of the results that came out was Sam Gerrans' video, a video on his channel. Wow. I'd been to the website once, maybe. I didn't know about the channel. One interesting thing, if I can digress a little, at the end of the Quranic Complete Revelation are Sam's his notes and background section, which is like, gives you a real insight into his method, his mind. And I read that a little bit at a time. When I'd read a couple pages of Quran, and I'd start reading a couple pages of that. It's about 35 pages, 40 pages at the end of the book. And so I knew his mind through that, and I really liked it. I mean, I was like, this guy is like, wow, he's the mind that I truly am feeling and jiving with and agree with to a level. I would say that it's unlike anybody I've ever experienced in my life. And I've met some really good minds, some in person and some not. But this was different. I mean, you're talking about the Quran. This is big stuff. So I found the videos and I was like, each one was like 58 minutes long. I was like, 50, there's two of them. 58 minutes long. Who is going to watch? You don't watch it because it's just him and a microphone talking. And for the newer ones, the older ones, it's, just a picture of a Qur'an. I mean, 57 minutes. That's a podcast, that's a commitment in this day and age. I mean, mostly you look at a YouTube video, if it's just a guy talking, I mean, you want him to shut the hell up after, a couple of minutes. You just want to get to the point. But the point is, what is him, is what he's talking about. His I call his videos, they're lessons, they're addendums, they're like a workbook, they're help, they're courageous. So I watched these two videos about the jinn, and I was totally like, wow. I mean, blown away about his ability to just lay it all out. And all right, wow, cool. So 2 weeks later, I finished my first read through the Quran. And I think the next day, I just happened to look on his channel, and all of a sudden I see a video saying the God protocol work finished. Or can't remember exactly how it is. It's linked below. And I took that as a sign that I should finally write him because I had a lot of questions, but a lot of them were actually answered. A combination of intuition and research, and I started watching his videos, and just there's so many of them. I mean, a couple dozen, maybe 50, and they're dense. They're not like these like 2 minute, and there's no animation. There's no pictures and funny business. It's just him and the truth of God and our situation. What the Quran has done for me is give me an insight to the world that I had been seeking, and that I journeyed in over 20 years to find. And that journey took me some very interesting places. I mean, I went to the Peruvian Amazon, and drank ayahuasca in the middle of the jungle for 8 days. And that was interesting, oh, that's God. I was in 2012. I must have found God here. Like, oh, that could be another video on its own. But now if I can just do a little aside, what actually is happening there is, I think, and with psychedelics in general, is that we're kind of just like, again, we're just like, it's like with the Bhagavad Gita and the Hindu gods and everything, and you're just like replugging into the system. It's like a wire plugged into like the same like outlet, it just boom, boom, and you're like, okay, so you're seeing a different part of the Earth matrix. Like that's how you get to see, let's say supposedly 10% of it is what we can actually visualize and see on a day-to-day basis. Maybe in the dream world we go there and stuff like that. But like, I'm talking about a waking, consciousness that, we're only seeing, let's say 10%. And so there's, 90% backstory there that like, that's what these natural and man-made substances can do. They can also, expose us to demonic forces. Anybody who really knows about it can totally agree with that. It's not anything that is far out. But the ayahuasca experience was was beautiful, and I'm very grateful to have done it. But it's not the source, you know. It's not the end all be all truth. If unless all you want to do is just figure out the Earth matrix, the Earth plane, then it's useful. But how does that really help you in the end? Well, one thing I would say that it really helps in the sense of like that you know that there is a hereafter. You know that there's something after death. That is like you just get the information is it's just very clear, and I think that can be very helpful because remember the Qur'an, it's not a religion. There's no religion in the book, as Sam Gerrans has pointed out numerous times. There's no Islam in the book. The book is about guidance in this lifetime so that a person, when they die and they are judged by God, that they are admitted into heaven instead of cast down into hell. And the book is also a protocol for defeating tyranny, as Sam has done, which is a story we will get into in another video. So a couple days, again, like after I literally finish the Quran, maybe a day later, I tune into his channel and I see a summary of his work on the God protocol, which I saw like a couple references to it on his website, and I was like, what the hell is this God protocol? But reading the back of the Quran and his notes and summary, I started getting an idea, and it's a couple times it's like, you know, like almost like that the Quran can be used as like a weapon. You know, like, wow, that is a concept that nobody talks about. So since then, I just started just absorbing videos, and I've watched so many, and I've watched them over again and commented a lot, as some of you may see. But you know, is it just more talking? Is it just it? You know, really comes down to it doesn't matter. It just, and I know Sam has repeatedly tried to impress upon his subscribers that, you know, his YouTube videos, as epic as they are, and like that could literally be someone's life work so far, that they're just a small fraction of his work, which is true. I mean, the Quran, a complete revelation, and the God protocol, that's the work. And I think it's just like it's so effortless for him to like do these videos that like he doesn't realize maybe that like the rest of us are like in awe of, you know, producing dozens of videos. Each one is, you know, some of them are an hour long. I mean, he has a 7.5 hour long work on the mysterious letters. I mean, I tried. I need to get some. I need to, you know, print out some workbook with it or something. Is that's something that come along later. But again, it doesn't matter. You know, it's not the key foundation. It's just like a side piece that I think that, you know, he says I'm helping solve like a 1,400-year-old mystery pretty much. So that's kind of cool. The Word of God, given to the prophet of mankind. That's the Quran is. And there's no religion in the Quran. And I'm definitely not here to, you know, talk about Islam being this or that. I just read the book, and I've studied, and I've researched, and there is nothing in there that says create a religion. So that's all I'm going to say about that. It's very simple. The laws in it, the guidance is better. I like the word guidance for that. The guidance for mankind is very simple. Whereas like religion just makes it so complex, no matter what it is. I don't care. Like, I mean, Buddhism, so complicated, you know, suffering and all this kind of stuff. And then like for, you know, Hindu, you know, the well, really what is it? It's just some kind of like an American, like pagan abomination now, yoga girl thing, like Ganesha and everything, like, you know, basically all that's like very, it's very, you know, a lot of Americans like it because it's like, do whatever you want, you know, especially like if you think like the Hare Krishna is like, what it's like based on hedonism essentially, you know, except that they don't eat cow. So it fits perfectly into the American ego where you can just do what thou will. Doesn't matter. Bargaining, mitigation. The Qur'an has none of that. The Qur'an lays it out and it doesn't look good. It does not look good at all. And that, I think, is a big turnoff, especially for the American ego, that they don't want to hear about it. And I'll be honest with you, if you would have told me, I kind of like slowly got pulled in, you know, like, but if you would have told me that like the end result so far, almost a year, you know, let's say just a year later, it would be that like I had to like make all these changes in my life, like romantically, energetically, friend, travel, all this, you know, viewpoint of the world, literally what this is that we're on, this matrix, this earth plane, you know, from that to just numerous, if I can use the term, red pills after red pills after red pills, and like some of the most harsh and hard to swallow because you realize you really got to make changes. But the guidance is so real, and the strength that I am gaining is so real that I can't see any other way of doing it. I mean, it's like this purification process. It's very real, real world, real time stuff to like make me a better, stronger person. My soul stronger, my body stronger, emotionally stronger. But it's hard, you know. I have definitely distanced myself from everyone pretty much but family and some guys I play music with. I've always kind of been an outsider, an outlier anyway, when it comes to like friends groups. I mean, I've dove into friends group and then left. And I'm like, what happened to that guy? Where is he? Well, I'm just not there anymore because I don't like it, or it's time to move on. And it's kind of like happened again. And like, people are like, where you been, you know? But like, I cannot expose myself so much to that, you know, oh, let's just have fun. That's what they're doing. They're just doing stuff to have fun, which, believe me, I have done a lot of things just for fun. I mean, that was pretty much my creed. If I had any kind of religion, let's say, it was that I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I'm just going to have fun. I'm in the pursuit of experiences. I am God having the experience of a human life, you know, which I'm not, you know, again, I'm mocking it, but like, kind of, it's like what it is. But like at one point in time, like you have to realize that we have the free will to submit to God and really, really get into it and purify ourselves. Because as Sam Gerrans has pointed out, which He's not making this up. We're all going to die. And there is a hereafter. And where you go is based upon how deeply you've submit to God and what you've done. Your actions, as Sam Gerrans has pointed out, are what count. Not your words, not your thoughts. Of course, your words and your thoughts can mold your actions. So by all means, think in the right direction and speak in the right direction, and your actions will be in the right direction. But it's the action. It's like what you do, what you happen, what actually happens, like what you do, where you go, what you're doing. And it doesn't look good for humanity. I got to tell you. Sam has a video that says, basically like everyone is pretty much going to go to hell, including your family. It's tough. That's a tough red pill. And I think that's also part of the reason why, like, when one really gets to this like awareness and let's call it awakening, it's like awakening. And that's another video I'm going to make, the difference between like the sleepers and then the lucid where I was like a very like awake part of lucid, but I was still asleep, because when you're lucid sleep, it's still sleeping. You're not awake. Okay. I have awoken. I'm still groggy, but I am awake. I have awoken. And I think when you get to this stage, when you're awake, and you realize that, like, these people, I mean, why bother? Well, it's kind of part of why I'm making these videos, is because I want to share my story. I feel like I need to get it out. And I feel like if it can help one person, then it's worth it. The effort and the work, it's worth it. And that's kind of like my motivation. And maybe it'll help a lot more than one person. Maybe it won't help anybody, but it helps me. And again, I think pulling back from the world is kind of a natural thing to do once you are awake. And I know a lot of people, they think they're awake. I thought I was awake too. Well, I wasn't. I was not awake. I was in a very lucid state. I'm not going to get into what percentage of people are in a state. I don't know. And there's varying degrees of lucidness. And I think I was very close to the fully awake state, but like to get to, that lucid state to fully awake, you need something to like, pop, to, something to wake you up. And that's what the Qur'an has done for me. It was that alarm clock. It woke me up. And I think maybe it woke you up too. Hopefully. But you got to read it. You really got to read it every day. And you got to accept what it's saying. And you might not like it. And it might take a year for you to understand and to really fully integrate it, like it is pretty much for me. But that's the path. And like I say this because like I've taken many paths to get here. And like maybe you can, especially if you're like a young guy, Sam Gerrans talks about this, like a lot of young guys out there, like, they're, especially nowadays, it's rough, man. And like, if you're like, like your 20s or something like that, like go right to this book. Okay. Sam Gerrans, he went out on the beyond the edge, the raggedy edge, to bring this to us, you know, and like I've gone out on the I've gone out beyond the raggedy edge. I'll tell you the truth, I really have. Okay, and I came back, and this is what I'm bringing. This is what I found. You know, the Qur'an, the complete revelation. Read it. Watch his videos. Read, study, start changing your life. Time is now. You know, start today, this minute, and we'll see what happens. Because, you know, we've already seen the world start shifting in real time, and it's not a theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's actually happening. And there's things on the horizon. Now I'm thinking things are shifting, you know, it's not, you know, I'm not necessarily of the opinion that like I think they present like worst case scenario through like the, you know, and then they kind of like amp it down. So like, oh, it's not that bad, you know. So it's going to be, it's like 40 to 60% of what, which is still a lot. But it's, you know, to me, it's like, okay, it's 100%. Like death camps is like 100%. Oh, but it doesn't really happen. It's more like, you know, vax pass. So that's like, you know, like 45%. Like, oh, that's not, you know. So that's kind of like we got like primed. But like, who knows? Who knows? I don't know. And especially considering that the payload of the God protocol has been delivered, which, you know, I understand it. Now I do. But it's intense. I mean, it's almost like the timer has been set, you know. The fuse is lit. And there's no going back. And I don't know when it's going to happen. I mean, maybe I'm more optimistic than Sam is. Maybe I'm just stupid, or I haven't been, you know, exposed as much as he has. And I mean, look, you know, Sam is the teacher. He's the professor. He's a different level. And I accept that. As much as I know, which is saying a lot for me to be able to like say that, is, believe me, if you knew me, you would say, okay, I'm going to, you know, like, let me be, you know, I'll teach you, because I'm like giving you, the professor is like, you know, I'm like handing it down to you. And I'm like, you know, look, bro, like, I'm just like, I'm handing this to you. I'm like trying to make it easy for you. Trying to make it easy for you. Read the book, watch the videos, research, study, and change your life. It's real, and it's happening, and it's the most important thing you'll ever do in your life. Thank you for listening.